Welcome, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. This is a select board meeting for January 21st, 2025, my daughter's birthday. If everyone will please, first of all, I want to say there is a sign-in sheet over on the table. If you didn't sign it on the way in, please do so before you leave, so we have a record of who was here in attendance. I'll ask everyone to rise and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next agenda item is the point in the meeting where we open it up for public comments. This is open for any discussion of anything that's not on the agenda, and now would be the time to do so. If there's anything.
Okay, I'd like to speak.
Yes, glad. I'll move to the podium, please. Put the microphone on there for the people on Zoom.
Good to go?
Good to go.
Thank you. Good evening, fellow community members, board. My name is Vlad Ivanov. I'm a resident of Dorset, and I am a taxpayer and property owner in Manchester. I'm a Russian Jewish immigrant whose family came here from Russia in 1989 as political refugees. And I live here in the area full-time with my wife, my 7-year-old daughter, and I've got a child on the way. Here tonight to bring your attention to a serious matter that cannot be ignored. This past Saturday morning, around 9 a.m., I came across a disturbing social media post on Facebook. This post made by Vice Chair Greg Cutler from a page called Selectboard Manchester VT Greg Cutler. Featured a headshot of President Trump with an Adolf Hitler mustache. Alongside the image, Greg included a caption. Given his trying to portray a serious badass, this might complete the effort, quote unquote. As someone who grew up under communism and anti-Semitism, I'm all too familiar with leaders who abuse their positions of power. Greg Cutler's use of Greg's Selectboard Facebook account as a platform to equate a publicly elected official with Adolf Hitler. It's not just inappropriate, serious ethical violation. We must remember the horrific crimes of Hitler, who don't know.
I know you've got prepared remarks, but I'm going to intervene here. As I understand it, so far in your presentation, you've spoken about candidate running for public office, and by law, we're not allowed to discuss a candidacy.
This is not an election
either in favor or opposed. So I want to make sure
this is not an election matter.
Okay,
and I'll get to
second.
Sir.
Allegation is a potential ethics violation. There is a protocol we go through to review ethics violations. It requires submitting a complaint to the officer, which would be the town manager, and it goes through the channels appropriately. I'm not convinced, and we're in the process of ethics training at this point through the state of Vermont. I'm not convinced that something of this nature falls under the purview of an ethics violation. I'm going to let you finish your presentation. I just wanted to let you know that you're welcome to make your remarks. It is a public meeting, and this is the public comments portion. And we'll see where it lands at that point.
I appreciate it.
Go ahead.
No, I appreciate you making that clear. Thank you. From the same account, it was then further posted. My name mentioned and contained justification of the original Trump Hitler post while expressing personal political grievances. Given these actions, I would like to formally request that the Select Board consider the resignation of Greg Cutler from his position. He's demonstrated a clear abuse of power posting from that account, representing you all, and should not be representing the taxpayers of this town in any official. Just want to pass to the chair so you see the exact post. It's got the page, where it's posted from, the image, and the captions. That's all I had. I will pause, see if you have any questions or if anyone has comments.
Like I said, this is a Facebook page, a private Facebook page. It's not under any authorization from the select board. It's not overseen by the select board. It reflects the views of the select board, and it's clear that it's a personally owned page.
You know who personally owns it? And
I do. I mean,
it's got the select board next to it. There's a Greg Cutler personal page, which freedom of speech, and then there's the.
but you could open up a
Of course,
Flat Ivanoff
of course, and representing.
page, perfectly legal, and but you don't represent the
I
town.
don't represent the town board or the taxpayers, correct?
So I
So, well, what should I, so is this,
was aware that this was going to be an issue, and did a
in
little bit.
respect, I wanted to give you all a heads up.
And as I said before, I don't believe that under the state guidelines, it falls under an ethics violation. One could criticize many Facebook posts as maybe reflecting poor judgment or a lapse of judgment at the time. And I understand this particular post, which I've seen on a number of Facebook pages. It wasn't just on the exact same picture. Even some well outside of the confines of this town.
Not representatives of the people
I
sitting here.
understand the difference in delineation that you're trying to make there. And I also understand the roots of your offense, being offended by this. I
Appreciate that.
understand that.
Also in the time that we're living in, as you see the protests of Colombia and a lot of hatred, some.
Based on the research that I've done, I don't believe that there's any violation here that would trigger an action by the select board. If you want to request an ethics review, that opportunity is open, and it would go through the regular channels, and at some point might reach. Much of it happens behind the scenes because there's a potential for causing damage to an individual by going through this process. So, but it could eventually wind up in a meeting. But
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask you?
I don't see it taking that court. I'm just providing you with
No, I appreciate.
my perspective on it.
I'm here to, this is a public discourse. I'm here to ask you. I appreciate your guidance. Follow-up question. You pointed to the ethics chair goes through here, but there's now a Vermont ethics committee that's external. Does it go through the external, then gets back to this board, or how does it work? If someone can explain that process.
So I'm the designated complaint recipient. That's my title. And we have a form on our website that you could use if you wanted to submit an ethics complaint. You can also submit one directly to the Ethics Commission. They would in turn evaluate it and briefly evaluate it. And then if they feel there might be some reason to investigate further, they would ask me to do that research. So you could submit it directly to them. It would come back to me eventually.
Understood. That's helpful. And how would I get the feedback if you're moving forward with the investigation?
I would respond to you. I would respond, and that's how you felt when you fill out the form. It would have your contact information.
Well, I've got no further comments. I don't know if there's any comments or questions, but thank you, Chair, for explaining. Appreciate it. And thank you for listening.
Well, thank you. Bob Standard. Yes, you have.
Yes, that's working.
You do. There's a microphone on there for the people that are attending by Zoom.
Then for the record, I'm Bob Standard. I've just been recently exposed to this event. First of all, there's a First Amendment issue. This is a private page that Greg has, put up a post, took it down immediately. This is just much to do about nothing from where I look at it. But I would say, to quote General John Kelly, former chief of staff of Donald Trump, that Donald Trump does exhibit fascist tendencies. And our newly elected and inaugurated vice president did refer to Donald Trump as America's Hitler. So let's not get too wound up about a stupid meme. Thank you.
Any other public comments on any topic that's not on the agenda? I don't see any hands up. The next order of business would be to approve the minutes from the meeting of January 7th, 2025.
I'll move to approve the minutes from January 7th, 2025.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. So Scott, we need to decide a date to sign the town meeting warning.
We do, and the first date that's available is January 23rd, Thursday, and the last date is February 2nd. So we have a 10-day window for that. Anita is going to be away for a few days of well-deserved vacation time, and so we're trying to work within her schedule and your schedule. She's going to be around on the 23rd in the morning, which is this Thursday, like I said, and then she'll be back on the 29th, 30th, and 31st, which is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of next week. So any of those days would be fine. It's usually a 5-minute meeting where you just open the meeting, sign the warning, close the meeting.
Historically, that meeting has taken place at 5 or 5:30. I know Jan has trouble making a 5 o'clock meeting because she gets out of work at 5. But like you said, it's a quick turnaround, and we do ask Anita to be here, and kind of be ashamed to invite her to come in the evening to a meeting. So anybody have any preference?
Thursday works, and that's, oh, actually, no, the 30th?
The 30th.
30th is Thursday,
Thursday.
following Thursday.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
that right?
Should be okay.
At what time? 5 o'clock?
5:40,
For Jan, it has to be 5:30.
5:45.
Okay.
So 30th at 5:45?
Okay, that's fine. Yeah,
Okay,
for time to get here.
great. Thank you.
Hey, does that require an action, or is it just
No.
something that we, census? The planning commission is here, or represented by the chair, and there's going to be an update to the select board on the progress of ongoing projects. Wilbur, if you're going to speak to this, now would be the time.
So you should have in your packets also the Manchester plan outline
Yes.
prepared by BCRC in conjunction with the planning commission. And the back page of that, it shows the strict timeline that we're working within.
So the quick overview is that in order to revise the town plan according to the calendar that we have to follow, this time we have to incorporate 4 new legislative components to it. And the town has agreed to hire BCRC to help them compose those 2, I call them amendments to the town plan. And that's in the process. There's a timeline that's on the information that you've been given. We've run out of it over here, but I know that you have it, that talks about when they're going to report back. We had a meeting with Callie and Sam from BCRC about 2 weeks ago, I believe, in which they told us what's going on. Sam showed us a number of new maps. Sam is in charge of updating the maps that the state wants, and I will detail what's happening there right now. the state wants all the towns, all 240 plus towns, to have the same type of zoning maps and nomenclature and colors and everything. So instead of us calling one territory forest and recreation, the state is going to have a terminology, and those are all set aside now. Then they're also going to have specific colors for the different maps, so everybody's on the same plane. That's being done by Sam, last name I'm going to forget. She came and presented to us. And then Callie is going to be working on the other components of the legislative changes to incorporate them. There are 4 in total, 170, 181, the Home Act, 174, 171. So that hopefully is going according to plan. Unfortunately, the plan's really tough, and we're not going to get their work back to us until February 3rd. And then we have to notify or warn it, and it has to be in place and the new town plan finished by, I believe the date is May 9th. It could have been May 7th. But that's in process, and hopefully when we get the work from BCRC on the 3rd of February, we won't have any problems with it and we can move ahead. So that's part of the questions you had. So I'm going to stop and see if there are any questions from you guys.
Yeah, it's good to hear that. It's a tight timeline because of the state imposed deadline for getting these amendments into or these elements into the town plan. It's and for people that are watching and listening, we're not contemplating at this point in time other significant changes to the town plan. What we're basically doing is reapproving, readopting the town plan, which has been done many, many times in the past, but incorporating these very narrow changes that are dictated. And in order to go through the process, it's got to be delivered. The language and the maps need to be delivered to the planning commission as the chair said by the 3rd. On the 7th, the warning goes out for the planning commission hearing. On March 10th, they have their hearing. March 11th, the select board will discuss the town plan and hearing dates. March 14th, the warning goes out for select board hearings. April 15th would be the first public hearing by the select board. April 22nd, a week later, would be the second public hearing by the select board, which would allow us to adopt at a regular select board meeting on May 6th. So there's no room for error in order to meet the state's timeline on this. So we've got this, and hopefully it'll all happen according to the plan, and we will get the town plan readopted, incorporating these changes. And thank you for letting us know what's happening there.
Bill, you have a question?
Move to the podium so that people can hear.
It's not Bill, is it?
You guys have done a good job. I've been following on Zoom. My question is, and I think a lot of concern is we had the 3-tier system that they were talking about. And as I was listening to that, we were to choose one of those tiers. Is that correct?
The town has, to capsulate it briefly, the town has enough controls of its development process to qualify to what's called a tier 1 level, which means in a fashion, we won't go through the same controls that Act 250 has, because we've already incorporated them into our planning. That's one of the changes that will take place. And yes, we want to be on the tier 1.
And does that take away authority from our zoning? The tier 1, 2, or 3 process?
I'm not sure anybody knows the answer to that, except I think it's going to be pretty cut and dried. If you adhere to these steps, then you don't go through the normal Act 250 process. And theoretically, in my opinion, it doesn't mean that someone from up in Montpelier is going to be able to tell you something different. It's a cut and dried, you either qualify or you don't. And we should qualify for tier 1, which should be beneficial to the town. Am I describing this accurately, Tom?
I believe you're correct.
Yeah, it's not going to override any of our zoning.
The same goes for when we're all done, after the select board has approved the revised town plan, then it has to be rubber stamped by BCRC. And I asked them when they were here, does that mean you have control over what we do and you can say no to what we want to do? And they say, it's just a rubber stamping procedural boom. And I hope that that's correct too.
And you believe that?
I don't think that they would misrepresent their position on this, but I think they tried to answer it as honestly as they could. They can't. Obviously, it's part of the process, so they have to approve what we've done. We are a member of BCRC. They do a lot of work for us in various capacities, and for the most part, we have a very good relationship with BCRC.
And from what I understand, Steve, is that the role that BCRC is playing in this is that their goal is to make sure that we've dotted every I and crossed every T. It's not to say it's a procedural step in the process of filing. It's not like, you can't do that because of this, or you can't do that because of Y. They just want to make sure we have everything uniform so that when they send it to the state, it's a mechanism also to make sure that there's not 250 different towns all submitting completely separate information. It's each of the regional planning districts are consolidating the information and sending it to the state in a more consolidated fashion.
Ivan, would you help me understand something? BCRC was set up for Bennington County to answer your questions so you could develop what you wanted to develop, not vice versa. And that's what's going on here. They're not asking you questions. You're not asking them questions. They're making decisions.
I'm going to interrupt you. We've had a really good relationship on the map process. Sam has come to us for information and help on our maps and our zoning and our colors and everything in trying to translate it to the statewide system. And I have not seen, and I'm pretty sure Peter and Elias would say the same thing, have not seen any negativity or overt control of what's happening. They're trying to do this, and they want to make all 240 some odd towns have the same map, same colors, same terminology, same everything, and that certainly makes sense.
Is that okay when you say Burlington and Manchester? What's going to be the difference?
The main difference is that most of what's in downtown Burlington would be downtown or core zones versus we have areas outside that are forest and recreation and rural recreation, et cetera.
Okay, thank you.
Well, would you mind also just quantifying how much we're paying them to engage in helping us? Because I think there's been
About $88,000.
I think there's been speculation that it was significantly higher than that.
It is.
We have an agreement with them.
Yeah. Well, besides being a town that pays an annual fee to them, which is, I think, even less than that, the extra work that they're doing on these four things is about $8,000.
Thanks.
So, and before I finish on that, I want to talk about what we're doing.
Okay, before we change topics, did you want to speak to the town plan?
Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
Okay, Bill, yeah.
I hear you talking about trying to standardize colors and things for different zones, but what about the definitions of zones? Like we have, what can take place in R1 and R10 and so on in the commercial core. Are they trying to standardize the standards for the various zones and also telling you, here's the zones you can use?
Here's their definition, the different zones here. And I don't believe that what's allowed in their zones is different than what's allowed in our zone terms.
If I could just jump in there too, Bill.
Please.
The idea of the map that they're working on for the full state is a planned land use map. It is not necessarily a zoning map. So our zoning districts are still going to consist of however we create them, whether we call them R1 or we call them, residential one, whatever.
So our zoning map, which we all work off of, will probably be different or can be different than the planning map.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, and in addition, one of the key pieces of this is the designations that there are, like Wilbur, you were mentioning, or Steve, you were talking about particularly downtown Burlington being primarily downtown, whereas some, we would have force. We have designations now such as village center. We have designations such as neighborhood designations, which allow us to do certain things beyond like applying for grants or whether it's
Primarily grant.
types things. So those things are things that will be changing, but those designations don't have any bearing on our actual zoning.
That map that Bill has in his hand is that of what BCRC/state is working on, correct?
A planning
Now,
map.
that's not gonna match what our town people have put together, our zoning people, so they're telling us what we're gonna need to do.
No.
The boundaries are the same. They're taking our map boundaries of each zone and applying it to basically their colors and their terminology. Is that accurate?
Yes.
You're giving it a little bit of different designation, and then I catching it, so it applies like when you want to apply for village center, there's certain grants, or a town center, you can get different grants for. I don't know why they have so many different designations, but it has a lot to do with getting grants and I guess standardizing that application in the categories. So, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we still had our independence on our own zoning maps. But
Our zoning ordinance will still be in place and it'll be unchanged.
Can I answer that? I think that what's taking place here might necessitate, after we finish the town plan, to take a hard look at the zoning. That's going to be the next step, is to make sure that our zoning applies to their state perception.
And that's relative to terminology, not the actual uses that are being applied to the various zones. We still have complete control over that, as long as we're not outside of what the state allows. It's within our purview to set those parameters.
So I want to talk about what we've done to date, so you know that we're trying to accomplish something. We took the town plan and broke it down into 10 categories. And one of them being vision, statement of purpose, the next housing, the next energy conservation, natural resources, climate, et cetera. And each of the 5 planning commission members took 2 components of those 10 and worked on them. And now we'll be getting back together we've got a lot of work already done. We'll get more work accomplished once we see Sam's final mapping issues. But that's the way we've attacked the elephant, one bite at a time, so to speak.
Good job. I really appreciate the energy and effort that you're putting into this. And I served on the planning commission back in the starting in 1980, I think. And we were lucky. We had the individual that actually drafted the original zoning for Manchester sitting on the planning commission, but we did it all in-house. And there really wasn't any staff. And the pendulum has swung for Manchester to the point where the planning commission really wasn't that involved in the actual drafting of the language or the conceptual ideas that had swung all the way over, so the staff was doing it. And I mentioned at the time that the trouble with bureaucrats, and Manchester is a much larger government than most towns of this size. And I call it a bureaucracy. There are bureaus and segments to it. The trouble with bureaucracies is that people that sit in those seats try to justify the reason for their existence by writing rules and ordinances. And I think under your guidance, the pendulum has swung back to where the planning commission is doing a lot of the legwork and coming up with the ideas. What the staff is for is much what we're using BCRC for, is to make sure that it's written correctly, it's in the correct legal language, and that it conforms with state statute. Other than that, it's all your ideas, and I think that's the way it's supposed to work.
Two responses to that. I think when all five of us have looked at the plan, town plan, one thing in common has been we think it's too wordy, too verbose, too long, and should be changed and made more succinct. So we're working on that. But another observation I had just recently, kind of preparing for this meeting, is I think we're going to need some clerical help to get to the end line because we're so tight in a time period. So, are there any other questions on the town plan issue? Because I'm going to move to the parking, pay for parking. So, Elias, I think some people don't understand, and I at times have a difficulty with this, the parking issue. And so Elias wrote this up, and I can distribute it to you or get it distributed. It says the town of Manchester is proposing to change the Manchester Land Use and Development Ordinance to condense the area in which payment in lieu of parking is available in the town of Manchester. Payment in lieu of parking is a section of the ordinance which allows commercial business owners to pay the town of Manchester an amount determined by the select board per parking space if they lack sufficient parking, with the goal that that money will go toward municipal parking to be built in the future. Right now, payment in lieu of parking exists, or it did until it's been stopped momentarily, in the mixed use one, the town center, the downtown zoning districts. The proposal is to decrease the allowable area for payment in lieu of parking to only the downtown zoning district, which goes from the roundabout at Shaw's, not to the south of it, but the roundabout at Shaw's down to School Street. And that's that district. And so that's what will be proposed to try to control, to have better control of the situation. And then I'll just close with saying that a number of towns are taking a laissez-faire look at parking and just saying there are no rules. And I'm not sure that's the best way, but it is something a lot of towns across the country are doing. So
The difficulty with downtowns in towns such as ours is that the historic buildings that make up the core were built in a time before automobiles. So parking wasn't really an issue. You had to have a place maybe to tie your horse, but and then over time, we didn't have zoning until 1971 in this town. So up until that point, there were no rules as to what got developed, but astute business people knew that they needed to park cars in order to get customers into their stores. When we created zoning ordinances here in Manchester, parking became a very important piece of it. You had to have, you've seen the numbers. If you have X number of seats in your restaurant, if you have a certain square footage of retail space, whatever it is, you have to have a very specific number of parking places to accommodate that. The trouble is that once we created those rules, and we stuck by it very, very faithfully, there were a lot of older buildings in town. If they lost their pre-existing status or became something else, they couldn't get a permit because they didn't have the required parking. And that was where the pay for parking came from. From my perspective, the reason for the pay for parking was to allow uses in those buildings that couldn't provide, they had no land, no way to provide the parking spaces, but they needed to be able to utilize their building. And there's people in this room that took advantage of that. And it worked very well. What we didn't anticipate was somebody coming into a parcel, leveling everything, building new construction at a deficit, and paying the town to make up that deficit for them somewhere else. And that's a slippery slope, and we weren't prepared really to accommodate that. The way the bylaw was written, we had to accommodate recently an application that exposed that issue. And at that point, we decided that maybe we'd let you guys take a look at it and see if there's a better way to express how we were going to have this work. And I defer to your expertise on how we're going to approach that. And I think probably constricting the zone makes sense. I can't think of a lot of areas where there are pre-existing buildings without land like there is right in the core that would need to take advantage of this. also in the context of that discussion, we were talking about what the cost should be, and this is our issue, not yours, what the person should pay for parking spaces. And it was recently discovered by Elias, actually, that in 2013, the Manchester zoning ordinance said that if you had deficit parking and were applying under this deficit parking section, the price of a parking space would be no less than, brace yourself, $15,000. This was in 2013.
Wow.
So we do need to take another look at that, because more recently it's been a much lower number than that. So, and that was based on engineering estimates at the time. And Bill, you might have a recollection. That was based on engineering estimates as to what it might cost the town to construct a parking lot and build parking spaces. So, anyways, Bill.
Hello. Hello.
I have been,
I guess, Tim, was that you?
That was Tim, but he hasn't raised his hand or anything.
Yeah, okay.
Get to him in a minute.
Hang in there.
I guess been the beneficiary or the victim of this a rule or ordinance. But my only caution in restricting the district, and I believe we've seen examples of this, of creative, let's say, ways to avoid putting in parking and maximizing your building footprint, which you alluded to. And then I'm next door and I'm seeing this with my property in another location that doesn't have sufficient parking, or for a matter of convenience, and I'm providing parking for my neighboring business. And you have to have equity. I don't care what zone it is, downtown or the mixed use and so on. If you're going to have pavement and aluminum parking, then the building size has to be, let's say, fit with the lot. You can't build more than you can provide the parking for. And you have to be ready to enforce that.
And the whole concept of payment in lieu of parking is that the money goes to the town, and the town
We'll create more.
will create the solution. So it has, the payment needs to be of a magnitude that would support that action by the town.
But we also don't have to approve it either, right?
Correct.
So that's where I think this got a little tricky, because I think it went through the other boards and came to us as a kind of a done deal when we hadn't really thought about the deficit parking component of it, nor had we updated what we should be collecting for each spot. So it was all not on.
Yeah,
Why we paused it.
Oh, I guess things ought to be maybe in a little tied together, the different entities that have responsibility, and the planning commission is planning what the parking would cost and so on, ought to be tied together, I think, before come to a definite conclusion in what the plan says, what zone it can do it in and not do it in.
The interesting thing to me, and Tim, you might want to comment on this, since you're the one that showed me the bylaw. It was part of the zoning ordinance. The actual fee was in the zoning ordinance. And that was not that many years ago, 12 years ago, barely, that it was no less than $15,000 per space.
That was part of the ordinance.
Yes, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
And the problem is, and I kind of had a hard time getting on, but the problem I have is when we rewrite an ordinance or a town plan, it's very tough if the way it's written, we don't have the old and the new side by side, X out what we're taking out and put in what we're putting in, because it's tough for anybody to read through the whole thing. And you might have missed it, everybody might have missed it, but when it was taken out, it's hard to know if it was taken out, because you're looking at the new ordinance, hey, it all looks good. But if you don't see it in front of you, what you're taking out, then you don't know
It's a little easier to follow if the side-by-side ordinances follow the same format.
Yes.
But the problem we've run into recently is complete rewrites where the old format goes away and it's all shuffled and put back in. And it's
Well, again,
and I think the only way to accommodate that would be to take the old ordinance as it existed, put in your crossed out and new language in the same format,
Oh, yeah.
and then create the new ordinance that takes that information and it's an extra step, but I think it's the only way to really follow what's happened.
Agreed.
I mean, it's worth doing. I talked to Wilbur about that as far as the town plan. When he does that, or when they try to rewrite that, take the original town plan. If you want to take out page 1, 2, 3, whatever, take it out, cross it out, put in what you're going to add to it. So at least we know where we started and where we're going to.
I think we're all on the same page.
And
on that.
even if they don't do that actually from the BCRC, if they don't give us the version that's been redlined and having the additions, we can easily compare the two documents now with technology and find all the places that there's changes within the text.
And if we have to on the new town plan, and the town plan is, as far as I know, is just a guideline. That's not our ordinance. That's, if I'm correct, that's what we're looking for.
Tim, the town plan becomes a regulatory document under Act 250. Because Act 250 under criteria, I believe it's 10, asks, does it comply with the town plan? And I believe if we go to a tier 1 town, the town plan once again becomes regulatory. Only we get to apply it, not the state of Vermont. So, yes, you're right. It's not supposed to be a regulatory document. It's supposed to be the foundation on which our land use ordinances are written, and they're supposed to reflect the goals in the town plan. But under Act 250 review, and I believe potentially tier 1 review of applications, the town plan then becomes regulatory.
So the town plan will be part of our zoning ordinance then? Is that what you're?
What happens, we take over the function of Act 250 because we have the staff and the ordinance to do it as a tier 1 town. What I'm not really clear on is the process. And like I said, under the Act 250 criteria, there is a distinct and separate criteria that says, does this project conform with the town plan? Now, logic would tell you that it should, because our zoning ordinance is written based on the foundation of the town plan, but they actually go and people will take a sentence or a paragraph out of the town plan and say it's not in conformance with this, and total projects have been turned down because of that implication. So I suspect, and I don't know that this is entirely true, that the same course of action could be taken in our review process. And Mike, maybe you know more about this than I do, but I believe somebody would be able to object if they were a party based on the town plan at the local level.
So I guess that being said, we should be careful.
I'm not asking for a legal.
I mean, if there's issues that the state wants us to implement in our town plan, and we have to, by law, we have to put them in our town plan, then we should, but we should be careful that we don't put in more than we have to, because if, like you say, if we're bound by that.
Yeah, well, the town plan should be vague by nature. And then the zoning ordinance defines what's being spelled out in the town plan. So the zoning ordinance should be the regulatory document, but it should reflect the goals of the town plan.
Right. The goals.
Yes.
Now, again, you're saying goals, not law. Am I correct? You're saying a goal. Our goal is to do this, but if we can't meet the goal, does that mean the project does not get done? Or I'm not, we have a goal.
Well,
we're trying to achieve this. But
I
if
think,
this
I think
doesn't
you
work
might
for
have
some-
nailed it, Tim, when you said that, you don't want to have too many specifics in the town plan. Because
Yes,
because under Act 250, when the town plan becomes a regulatory document, people can point to those specifics and they may be different than what it says in the zoning ordinance or the land use ordinance.
okay. That was my spiel.
Yes, Steve, you've had your hand up for a while.
I side with Bill on this parking issue, and I sent you all an email the other day when it was so busy in town. I got in traffic and I started at Maple Fields, and I had a chance to look, and I drove through town, and it took me probably 10 minutes to get through town. And in that, there were 5 vacant parking spots in front of Christos in the downtown core there. I turned up to TD Bank and there were 3 parking spots right on the road. Now, mind you, this was right around noontime. Okay? We have so much more parking, and Ivan, you know this, than we did in years past when Factory Point was downtown. I mean, if we couldn't find a parking spot, we pulled across the street and we parked and we walked. The parking area at Crystal Palace in the back, never used. Okay? Very little does the new parking area get used as well. There's
You're talking-
not a lot of
You're
cars.
talking about the parking spaces behind Walgreens.
Yeah. The advantage is taking up a lot of the parking within where Long Ago and Far Away is. But is parking really a problem? We can all look at that as a whole. Now, the part with pay for parking, what does that help a business? You pay for the town parking? It doesn't help creating parking spots, i.e. for Christo, and I've had conversation with them.
Oh, it has. And for instance, when Factory Point was redeveloped with a deficit of parking, and there was a payment in lieu of parking that went to the town, and that money was spent on the Walgreens parking lot, which needs more directive signage, probably.
It's huge.
It gets used, but it's not, it's not, I don't think we have as a big a problem as we think we do downtown.
I will say that I know of businesses that historically, and they're businesses that are side by side, and Bill mentioned this earlier, where people from this business use up the spaces because they don't have enough, and they use up the spaces on the other business, which is part of their zoning permit for their own use, and they're coveted by them. Now those spaces are used up, so their customers don't have a place to park, so they have to go look somewhere else. It does exist. The problem does exist. And the payment in lieu of parking puts the onus on the town to find the solutions. And that's what the money is supposed to be used for.
I mean, as far as parking, going to Charlie's for coffee or going to the Vermont Country Store for a sandwich, I'll go to Charlie's for a cup of coffee, leave my car there, and I'll go to Vermont Country Store and get a sandwich. So there's beneficial uses of parking.
Meantime,
Yeah.
while you do that, 4 cars coming in, can't find a place to park.
And I understand that.
Because when you go to get that sandwich, you're going to stop and talk.
I will, but I just don't think we really have the big problem.
These are discussions that, Wilbur's just giving us an update on where they are.
I want to introduce our 2 newest planning commission members, Carolyn Alderman and David Michelson. And if there are any complaints, right there, okay?
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for stepping up and
We gotta move this along.
we need to move this along. Yes, that's, I've just been reminded. So thank you, Wilbur.
Let's fall asleep.
We have, Neil is here. We have a class 2 vending license renewal for Hound Dog.
Right, so, I mean, last time we hadn't had a discussion about the different classes, and now you have his application in front of you along with the layout of his location. And so now this isn't a renewal or renewal of a license for an annual license with a permit fee of $1,000, which is what our current rates are at. You'll see his layout plan showing the two trailers and the cooler. And you all know where his location is. And he had permission for it from the property owner. And just before you get into the discussion, I mean, we talked about at the last meeting, you know, the requirements of a class 1 and the requirements of a class 2, you know, and did we want to enforce that this year as opposed to kind of letting things slide a little bit? And I think your answer generally was a consensus of, yes, we should enforce the terms and the regs of each license. And so that brings up this point, this application, which we have no major issues with, other than the fact that it has like 284 square feet in the layout, and the class 2 is limited to 200 square feet. So that's really the only issue here for Neil's renewal of his vendor's license.
Oh,
The cooler, does the cooler add the extra square
well, the
footage?
cooler's 10 by 5, so it's 50 square feet.
And you might remember last year, we allowed him and others to leave their equipment
Yes.
rather than having to move it every night.
I guess,
Is this,
sorry,
this is the same configuration that you used last year, correct?
Ongoing, yeah.
my problem isn't with what they want to do. My problem is that we keep saying we're going to update the zoning laws to reflect the ability to do this. So in other words, if we're going to just keep making exceptions year after year for them to do it, why don't we just update the ordinance?
And we can do that. We just haven't done it yet. And if that's the direction you want to go, then we'll just do
It's
that.
like the third year that we've said that.
So, yeah, but the
I haven't heard.
on this one becomes, this is a configuration that's been in place, and appears to work for everyone involved. And it's kind of been sliding along.
I don't remember the silver trailer, do you? I don't remember seeing the silver trailer. Maybe it's just because I see the red trailer all the time.
It's been there. We had that discussion last year about it.
Yeah. Was that going away and coming back too before we granted the?
No, actually, that one was staying, and then we said, well, you guys said that everything could stay.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. I interrupted.
I just, if it's reasonable in this instance for a class 2 to have 280 square feet, maybe that should, at some point we should change the ordinance. And if we anticipate doing that, then I would hold off on enforcement on this. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
The numbers- the numbers were random. It's just something that,
I get it, and they're probably outdated, so why don't we, move forward with his application tonight, and we can bring to you in the near future some changes for the suggested changes for
the numbers,
license regulations.
300 square feet. I don't know. I think we have had other vendors and other locations that have had something similar.
Yeah, I mean, he's not the only one. There's not almost, but there are a lot of others. We only have 6 all told anyway, so 3 of each.
But if, we've had a lot of discussions around when does it become
Mhm.
not fair to restaurant owners and so I think that we need to get clear on what we actually want and
Sure.
instead of just always saying, let's let it slide this year and we'll come back to it, let's just.
So let's put it on a future agenda and have that discussion.
Yeah.
We'll bring in some suggestions.
in the, Wilbur, you had something you wanted to add?
Two things. I think there are a lot of things we need to do.
You might have to go to the microphone because people at home can't hear you.
There are a lot of things that need to be fixed or changed in the ordinances, maybe even more so than the town plan. And that's a perfect example of it. And then my personal opinion is I don't think the town wants to inhibit a local businessman and unnecessarily.
You may not have been here for some of the discussion on this, but there needs to be a very clear delineation between vendors and bricks and mortar restaurants, because people that own restaurants have to provide parking as part of their zoning ordinance or zoning permit. They have to go through all sorts of health department things. They're required to have a restroom, sanitary facilities. They pay taxes. All these things that are a restaurant owner has to do that a vendor doesn't have to do. And one of the things that we need to track at some level is, does having the vending operation on parking spaces take the underlying property out of compliance? Did they need all those parking spaces in order to operate their business? And now they've given a couple away to a vendor. I mean, those may be the kind of things that we don't really pay attention to that we probably should. But a vending operation needs, by this very definition, needs to be very different from a restaurant. Otherwise, they have an unfair advantage over a restaurant.
Are you looking for a motion?
I am.
I'd like to move that we approve the Class 2 vendor license renewal for Hound Dogs meal.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's approved. And we will continue to discuss this and look at it and see how to make it fair for all.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't get you away anymore. We'll see you next year.
We'll do another waiver.
Yeah, probably. Okay, we, as designated by law, we need to designate some Republicans to serve as election officials. There needs to be a balance. And we have a list of
Three.
three, and those three are, I'll have it here in a second. Eric Salat, Howard O'Donovan, and Carol DuPont. That was, they were suggested by the
Manchester Republican Party.
Manchester Republican Party. Very good.
So I'd like to move that we designate the three Republicans as suggested to serve as election officials for the Manchester Republican Party.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Done. We recently have gone through a number of hoops, and we were successful in accessing municipal energy, blah, 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 MERP, MERP, grant to do some energy improvements here at Town Hall. And what we're looking at is, at this point, is awarding a contract for the Kilburn Room insulation.
So this room is very, very drafty. It's one of the key spots that was found, some leaking, the energy leaking out of the building when they did the energy audit in here last year. And so we wanted to get to this one first as part of that MERP grant fund. You can see the old skylights that just got plywood over them, and then the louvers that don't work here, that just air's flowing right out of them. And there's no insulation. So this work here will take care of this room to start. And so we put it on an RFP, we received 2 bids. This is the better bid and is recommended by the Energy Committee also. And it will be, and it can, the guy can get to the work shortly. So
And the total award was
449,000. Yeah, this is only 22,400 of it.
Trailers for how much stuff
449,000.
that you got?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
And that's for this building, public safety.
right. And some of the other work, Steve, just so you know, is, installing heat pumps to work in conjunction with the oil fired boilers. replacing an existing cooling only split type system, replacing weather stripping in those large garage doors on the fire department and rescue squad building. And then we have some envelope work, some more ceiling and roof work in other parts of the building. And then an ADA bathroom out here, which is all part of it too. So that's coming down the road as part of this grant.
So, you need an action here.
Just to approve this contract.
Move to approve or to award the contract for the Kilburn room insulation with the, as the first project of the MERP funds that we were awarded.
Second. Seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that's 4-0. And we'll move on to agenda item number 10, which is an interesting,
Well, we've been talking about the ethics, not just tonight, but previously, previous meetings. And this is part of it. We have to put a new ordinance in. So the league helped us craft this language. If approved, adopted tonight, go into effect in 60 days. And of course, there'd be a 44-day period that people could oppose it with signatures in a petition. But basically, this says what happens when there's a complaint, what's the process, how do you make a complaint? And as we mentioned earlier this evening, there's a designated complaint recipient, that's myself. If the complaint's against myself, then it would go to the chair of the select board. And I would have to investigate this and also would investigate any complaint that came through the state ethics commission. So, and there's a due process and there's a resulting results that could happen, enforcement against the elected officials. And so there's certain steps that could occur. So we need to adopt this and put it in place for the future, for the new state regs.
and if we adopt this tonight, it becomes effective March
24.
24.
And there's also online training that goes with this that I actually completed, and it's very doable.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, see,
In your comment earlier, Ivan, not confirming, how can you confirm as such that the issue that's ongoing with Greg, that it's unethical or ethical? How can you draw that conclusion that?
I have not yet gone through the training on this. We all have to go through the training. It's something that we'll have to do by the deadline. There are people within our town umbrella that have gone through the training, and I've in discussions with individuals that understand the process. The ethics really, from the state's perspective, speaks more to conflict of interest than anything else.
Yeah, I read that.
So, you know, that's what they're trying to define and gain control of. And it's so hard in a small town to try to decide if you have a conflict. I mean, we all have a conflict with everything that we do. If I fight hard to keep the taxes down, I have a vested interest in that because I own property. So is there a conflict of interest? Do I have to recuse myself from voting on the budget? It's ludicrous. And so there are going to be parallel conflicts. It's when it becomes, if you have a chance to gain or lose because of a decision that's made and you participate in that decision for your own personal benefit, is when it becomes a conflict of interest. And there's other, I mean, like I said, it's pretty complicated. I haven't taken the training yet. And I'm not looking forward to it, but I will do it.
I think people need to understand, if they have an ethical issue with the select board, where does that complaint go first? Now, according to reading.
There's two venues.
Right.
First one is directly through Scott.
Okay,
The second one is through the website, which then ultimately goes to Scott.
But he works for the select board.
But he's.
But I'm the ethics liaison. So the ethics commission will answer the question for us. So if I get all this information and I'm uncertain if it's an ethical problem, I will ask them, and they have a system set up where they will evaluate it and give us an answer. So it won't be just me as an independent person who actually, you're right, does work for the select board, making a decision. The ethics commission themselves encourage us to ask those questions.
And you have to understand, the town of Manchester operates under a town manager structure. And the select board doesn't set the structure for how a town manager operates. That's set by the state of Vermont. And he has the authority on many issues in town, and it is taken away from us. If we had a town administrator, they work for the select board and the select board makes the decisions. But Scott has the authority and the purview to make decisions relative to personnel. He does all the hiring and firing. It would be probably not wise or imprudent to hire and fire people without at least discussing it with the select board and bring us into the process. But he has that authority by state statute. So, and this is, so yes, he's hired by the select board, and on any number of areas, he works for the select board, but not in all areas. In some areas, we are subject to his authority. So,
This actually formalizes the procedures. It makes it a lot more clear, and it gives you a venue to make sure there's accountability. So I think this is great.
No, I don't question what's going on. I mean, I want to
I'll
know.
point out that ethics is one part of the code of conduct, but there is a larger code of conduct that the town has in place that gets specifically into areas other than ethical consideration.
And that's a code of conduct for the town of Manchester.
Code of conduct for the town of Manchester, that's part.
And we did, I know that.
Yeah.
That's in addition to the state.
Yeah, the code of conduct is our own document. And it's an employee document. Mike.
Just to clarify one thing, whatever you do in adopting this, that's not going to apply to the complaint pending before you, because that's conduct that took place before you adopted.
Correct. So, and to that point, we closely follow the same procedure that's outlined in this ordinance.
That's right. When they passed Act 171, they got rid of all the town's code of ethics that they had in place, which was kind of a mistake because then they waited till January 1st to start doing this. But you have already designated me as the designated complaint recipient. So we do have that in place, and so I can receive complaints, and we do have a form on the website.
And those complaints would go to the state for their consideration.
But you haven't adopted that ordinance.
They forced it upon us, actually. I mean, we're adopting this as our local portion of it, but Act 171.
171 is already in.
It's already in place. They took away the town's individual code of ethics, and now it's all under state purview. And so in order to comply with that, we appointed an ethics liaison to that board. And so he's the focal point for any complaints that would come in. So,
But you have on the agenda, number 10.
Yeah.
To adopt a code of ethics ordinance. And we're talking about conduct that took place before you adopt the ordinance.
So if you want to talk about conduct that took place and a complaint that came in prior to us adopting this ordinance, we are bound to transfer that to the state because we don't have a code of ethics because Act 171 took that away. And our liaison to the state by a previous decision by this board at a meeting, a couple of meetings ago, we appointed Scott as our liaison. So
it's under Act 171.
It's under Act 171. It's not under this, what we're approving right now. Under Act 171, the complaint goes to the state and Scott gathers all the information and sends it to him. He's our liaison.
It's unclear to me what the standard,
The state knows what the standards are.
they know a lot.
But they have in their act, I read that it's mandatory for a liaison. So you've already done that.
Yeah, we have the liaison.
And we've been in contact with the Ethics Commission. They know that I am the liaison from Manchester.
So the process that we outlined earlier in this meeting is the process. Scott would be the guy that you'd contact. Unless the complaint is about him, then I'm the liaison. Because obviously he can't act on his own.
So I'd like to move that we adopt the Code of Ethics Investigation and Enforcement Ordinance.
I'll second.
Any discussion? We've had a lot. All in favor, say aye.
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 All right, if you could sign this as pass on, there's very little space down the bottom. It's all in that blank area down the bottom. If you could just squeeze
Yeah, sorry.
more signatures.
Little.
Thank you.
Code of ethic, code of conduct is how it's labeled for the town of Manchester, correct?
The code of conduct is a part of our employee handbook.
So this should actually say code of ethics investigation.
Some signatures like a birthday card.
And it's from the state of Vermont.
So we're thinking of the ethics.
Yeah, this is,
If you want to segregate those both, don't you, Scott, want to say?
I'm sorry, I was not paying attention, Steve.
Well, this says code of ethics investigation enforcement ordinance. You have a code of, the town of Manchester has a code of conduct.
We have a personnel policy that includes the
Right,
codes of
right.
conduct.
Now, but shouldn't this read code of ethics investigation and enforcement ordinance by the state of Vermont?
Once this ordinance goes into place, it becomes part and parcel of that.
Right, I just want to make people clear that there is a code of conduct in the personnel file for the town of Manchester, and there's also the code of ethics from the state of Vermont.
Excuse me, can I just add something? Isn't that in A as part of the new state statute? Wouldn't that imply it's coming from Vermont?
Mhm.
That says it,
We're required to adopt it.
yeah,
it's,
from the state.
all we're doing is putting in place the document that the state wants us to put in place.
Okay.
Town manager updates. We acted on that, right?
Yes, we did. It's all signed and taken care of. Just a couple quick items. One, we're replacing some of our streetlights with LED streetlights. There's about 40 units out there. You might see them. They're on the tall telephone poles. These are not the short historic lights.
Mhm.
These are the tall ones that have an arm hanging out, not like the Cobra arms, but more of like a historic lantern.
Yep.
But it's way up there. It's hardly seen. And they're costing us $1,300 a month right now. And Green Mountain's gonna replace them all, 40 units with LED lights, and it's gonna cost us about 600. So we're gonna save quite a bit of money when that happens, and it's not gonna cost us any money to replace the lights.
Do they maintain them too?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Sounds like a great plan.
I like that one.
And the Bourne flood mitigation plan that we've been working on and talking about, that's our application is being formed right now by Jim Henderson of BCRC, and we're gathering some historic flooding information and costs, and we'll get that application in soon.
Excellent.
Ivan, is it okay if I ask a question? Police officer standing behind me, is that gonna be a regular thing?
Only when you're here.
Yeah! That came from somebody on email. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, did you see what's in the executive session?
Sorry?
Did you see what's in the executive session?
I did,
Okay, so union negotiations.
okay.
to come out and make a decision on that, which is why this young man has. joined
Okay.
us.
Then thank you for the explanation.
He's welcome to sit too, if he'd like.
Yeah.
Any other updates, Scott?
Well, that's it. Thank you.
Any other business here at this table? If not, we'll do what Heidi just suggested and go into executive session.
We have to use the right terminology.
Next meeting date before we do.
The premature disclosure.
I'm gonna do that. You want me to do that? All right, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to go to executive session to discuss labor negotiation and real estate contract and negotiation, the premature disclosure of which could put the town at a distinct disadvantage.
Oh,
We have a motion. Is there a second?
There's a second.
Will there be anybody joining us in the, Scott, anybody joining us in the executive session?
No.
Okay,
Right out.
all in favor, say aye.